Okay, so this is my final journal entry for multi-lit. 352. And I decided to use the podcast, or I guess more of a voiceover, to express my experience within the teaching program. And I just would like to start by saying it is a little bit difficult to do this as it has only been 2.5 months. And in that time, it has been a very busy 2.5 months. So, although I have learned things in multiliteracies, as well as through other avenues within the teaching program, there is still a lot that I need to learn. And I feel that within those 2.5 months, I haven't learned a whole lot in comparison to what I need to know and what I'll learn over the next many years, whether in this profession and others. But I would say that I have realized in relation to multiliteracies, and whether that is learning within the specific class or through my observation class, my weekly observation class that occurs at a high school in the Saanich School District. I would say that I have seen how, many learning styles, identities, and people are shaped differently. And that speaks to the nature of multiliteracies. We all learn through different lenses. And this really speaks to how dynamic the position of becoming a teacher or educator is. We need to learn how to make students multiliterate so they are able to know which way they learn best. So moving on from that, I would say coming into this program, and I don't want this to sound pretentious, but I do feel like I've been lucky enough to be quite multiliterate, and I feel like I have held and hold quite a few multiliterate strategies. Just the nature, and it is coming from a place of privilege, as I have had opportunity to learn through so many different avenues. And what that's making me realize is that learning is so much more powerful when you are multiliterate or you're exposed to different styles of learning, which can relate to multimodalities. And I think that the stressor here is that the more multiliterate we are, the better we are able to understand a diversity of languages, and whether those are technological or cultural. But it lets us produce our own pieces of work that are well-rounded and complex because we are aware of the multiliteracies that are out there. And so I kind of move on to, and I'd like to touch on pedagogies, which I looked at within my first visual journal, and specifically in relation to my observation periods at the high school, but within my university degree and career as well. I would say that I've noticed that there isn't one pedagogy that works best. And then although certain educators do tend to portray a single pedagogy, we need to realize that we should be utilizing multiple. And this is because, as I was saying before, students learn differently. And we need to figure out ways that students learn best. So we need to teach through multiple senses of pedagogy. And I think that really relates to the overlying or underlying concept of multiliteracies. Some students might learn best through the didactic. others through the open or others through the authentic. But it just shows that, again, how diverse we need to be as teachers and well-versed within multiliteracies if we are going to be great educators. I would also say that through this kind of short journey of 2.5 months, learning multiliteracies in a more in-depth sense has really shown me how essential it is, to let the students learn through dynamic multimodal projects, as it allows them to kind of explore the different ways that they can express themselves and the different ways that they can learn. And although they might start, we can relate this to the This Is Me project. You may start the project with, using music and video and art, but you might at the end of that process realize, wow, like arts really is what I want to focus on. And then that allows you to refine your learning style. But you've worked through that process. You have gone through the multimodal process to realize which way you learn best. And I think it also shows that learning can be much more powerful when it is multimodal. And that's where I'd like to reflect on my This Is Me project, for instance, that I think this is the most fundamental thing I've learned over the 2.5 months, is that it's easy to sometimes believe that you know yourself and what makes you happy, but to actually sit down and produce something that lets you do it however you want to makes you truly realize, how you learn best, or what really makes you itch and tick. And that's what the This Is Me project did. It made me realize how much creativity I need in my life, both to feel good as a person, as well as be a good teacher, and as well as just to function in the world. I need to be able to access that creativity. And that project really let me realize that. Because when I sat down, I went to music, I went to film, I went to photography, I went to poetry. And although I float through this world and think that those things define me, when you're faced with a project that really makes you think about those things, you realize it's like, no, these truly are the things that kind of make me the person I am. So I think that there's so much value in doing projects such as that. But as teachers, we also need to realize that if we are going to assign projects like this, whether it's through open or guided inquiry, we need to provide the skills for them to be able to do this. And whether this is actually teaching them in class like we did in our multiliteracies class, going through photo editing skills, video editing skills, etc., we need to lay the students with some sort of baseline so they're not completely illiterate when it comes to these technologies that they can really use to their benefit and that they can use to express themselves. And I think that brings up the other point that although we might be good at certain things now, by becoming multiliterate and using multimodal expression, we may realize that there are other avenues which we can better learn and better express ourselves. So this is another thing that we will really see as teachers. As we teach these skills to students, we may see significant growth within the students' learning as well. I also think we need to consider the value of multiliteracy as in society and how it can allow for people to better understand one another. If we're simply taught one narrative and expected to learn in only a few narrow-minded ways, then how do we expect to learn from each other? How do we expect to live in an accepting and open society where different cultures are understood and incorporated and listened to? I think that, for instance, once again, with the This Is Me project, we can see that it really defines who the person is. And it's more than just the ways they learn, but it's really who they are and how they fit into the world and how they listen to the world and see it. And if we allow for more of that to happen, we can begin to develop acceptance and understanding. And I really think of it in the terms of academics where, there are very Western dominated perspectives put forth, both within the classroom and academia as a whole. Or we see that there is more right-wing, sort of a right-wing movement developing, which is very nationalist worldwide. Now, what if we allowed for cultures to express themselves more within society, especially societies that are very multicultural? Well, we would probably have a greater understanding of them. And I think that this is something we need to teach our students, that we need them to be who they are. We need them to uphold those values, and not only for themselves and their own identities and their own cultures, but for others to learn from and take things away and incorporate them into their own lives. And I think that allows for true multiliteracy, because when we think of it as multiliteracy is both linguistic diversity and multimodal forms of linguistic expression and representation. So if we're not just doing this individually, but we're doing it as a whole within society, then yes, we will have a multiliterate society, which I truly believe will allow for more acceptance and understanding to form. And this shows how rich multiliteracies is. That it allows for cultural literacies to form, as we've mentioned before. But it also allows for things such as the eco-justice pedagogy to form, or eco-literacy, or things like critical literacies to further Indigenous knowledge and understanding. And we can also think about it in terms of multiliteracies, in terms of technological literacies, to further understanding of how we can better navigate within the rapidly changing technological world. And so, as I've said before, I think we can really see how encompassing multiliteracies are. And that this can not only make us more understanding and literate with different forms of culture and society, but it can also allow us to be critical of these things as we gain perspective. We can look at society and ask, who decides what messages are conveyed within society, and how social messaging and even power dynamics are created between people. So, as teachers, we really need to utilize and educate within a multiliteracy scope. And the more projects and class activities that we bring to our classrooms to allow for that multimodal style of learning to form, we are going to create students that are more aware, who are more understanding, and who are ultimately more educated. We are going to have students who have learned more about themselves as well as others and the world around them. And so my biggest takeaway from these 2.5 months is that the more we can empower within students through this multiliteracies lens, I truly believe that we're going to empower learners in the most authentic and true sense. So thank you for this course, and thank you for making me learn these things. And I hope that I can incorporate these concepts of multiliteracies into my classroom to let learners understand the most they can about both themselves and the complex world that exists around them.